there's a tremendous amount of responsibility on leaders' shoulders that's different from what they were accustomed to. It's no longer just operational KPIs. It's also, how do your people feel, and do they trust you, and do they want to work for you? And it's not just a paycheck, it's, are they recommending this as a place somebody else would work? There's so many factors. And it's recognizing as leaders, we're not the ones with the answers. We may see a vision and have direction, but 100%. If we're not willing to listen to our employees and get that input, we're not moving forward.
Hi everyone, welcome back to the HR Leaders Podcast. Today I'm joined by Robin Everhart, Senior Vice President and Chief HR and Transformation Officer at Louisiana-Pacific Corporation. On the episode, we discuss the importance of communication, leadership, behaviors, and how it shapes culture. We also talk about the top 3 competencies leaders need to be successful in a VUCA world. And last but not least, we talk about the art of being fired and always recreating our better selves. As always, before we jump into the episode, make sure you hit that subscribe button, turn on the notification bells, and follow on your favorite podcast platform so you never miss out. With that being said, let's jump into the episode. Robin, welcome back to the show. How are you?
Thanks, Chris. I'm great. It's so good to see you again.
How's it been, by the way? I feel like time just goes so fast these days.
So fast. I feel like last time you and I spoke was 3 or 4 years ago, I think. And you just had a baby and I was at a totally different company and have been in different roles, and it's really exciting.
Got new hair? You got new hairstyle as well?
No, old hairstyle, just down.
Is it? Oh, for me, it looks like it's super.
It's grayer.
No, I can't even see the gray. So.
Oh, I promise you. Look.
Do you know what? The other day I found my first gray hair, and I've got one. I've got one right near the front, and I was like, oh, it took until I was 34. So I was like, I feel like I done all right. I feel like,
you know what?
I feel like I done well.
That gray hair has a story. All good. Go with it.
It's just the stress. That's just, it's just coming out as well. Although Shane, my co-founder, I always laugh at him about this, but he's had gray hair since we were like 20. So I was like, dude, you need to chill out a little bit. Relax. But anyway, how's family? How's things?
Family's great. I have the 3 girls still. The oldest is 15. The twins are 14. They're all going to be in high school next year.
Wow.
Which it blows my mind how fast it goes. So you just.
I'm going to be calling you for advice. I'm going to be calling you. I can barely deal with 1 right now, let alone 3 as well. So that's amazing. That's amazing. So how do you feel about that when you think that, when they all get out of the house and go to college, that's going to be a moment right there?
Oh, it's going to be such a moment. And I feel like they're all going to be going at the same time. And I think for my husband, it's going to be even harder.
Really? Because
he's really tied to the family being together and the girls being around and, driving them to their extracurriculars. And I think it's going to feel super empty.
Yeah. I feel like dads are like really, I definitely feel like I'm more emotional, attached to it with Robin. And like my wife's always like, she's gonna fall over, it's fine. Or like I'm like so protective over everything, and she's like, just chill. It's fine, Chris. And I'm like, all right.
Daddies and daughters, it's special.
Yeah.
And I'm on the flip side where I will absolutely miss them and want them to come back, but I'm loving watching them spread their wings and who they're becoming. Yeah. That my goal is I can't wait to see what they go do in the world, because this is the generation that's just gonna go make such an impact. So
that's cool. Yeah, that's cool. And for those that are watching, you've got some boxes behind you. So just so everyone know, you're off to a new office, which is amazing. It's cool.
Off to a new office. It's exciting. We're probably like every other company that you've spoken to, and we're in the throes of kind of that hybrid environment coming off of COVID and what we're doing next. So pardon the mess, but exciting times.
No, it's a sign of progress and exciting, which is why I brought it up, by the way. I think it's really cool. I don't want to go into the entire story because I'm sure you're probably tired of talking about going into, hybrid work and new workplace, but what were the main considerations and things that you and the team were looking for when you were considering the new space?
A smaller space, more accessible space, right, from commute standpoint, and more usable space, so that when individuals do choose to be in the office, they've got the opportunity to be more collaborative, more innovative, feel like it's a little more upbeat. And have have access. So
Mm-hmm.
right now we're spread out through multiple floors in a 21-story high rise, and
Oh,
it puts
wow.
us into an environment where throughout 2 floors in kind of our own building, we have access to each other. And I think that's really important.
Yeah, that collaboration piece is so important now. People are so hungry for it. At the same time, how are you managing sort of the space? Because if everyone, it's like a gym membership model, I suppose. If everyone turns up on the same day, you're
Yeah.
like, what's
Yeah,
it?
it's a great question. We did take it into consideration. So the new space actually, if everybody showed up, and we call it butts and seats, right? If
Okay.
everybody did show up for some reason, there's enough space in the environment that everybody would have some place that they
Oh,
could
really? You
settle
done well then.
or sit.
Yeah.
But it wouldn't be designated, right? So we have hoteling software. So for the most part, people can come and sign into their hubs and have a place to sit. But there's enough with the cafe and everything else that if more people showed up than had been anticipated on any given day, there's still space for them to be part
Really?
of.
Oh, you done well. Because most people I spoke to, they don't, if everyone turned up, they're screwed. they got,
We still got it, but you may be sitting at a table in the cafeteria with 6 people and have much more of a collaborative
it'd be a great day.
than
Yeah.
than sitting, in a desk or small office space doing some isolated work. Yeah.
Yeah. It's been, obviously we mentioned at the beginning, so long since we spoke. What's really top of mind for you right now, especially with all the world's, we thought it was already crazy the last 2 years. It seems like it's just getting even crazier these days.
Yeah. Well, still coming off of the pandemic, now endemic, if you will, and making sure that we maintain safety and well-being of our individuals, but talent. I mean, I think everybody's, the labor market, having the right talent, finding the right balance between the hybrid and what's going to attract and retain people, being respectful of the fact, though, that the majority of our 5,000 people are in mills, so that hybrid environment doesn't exist. And being conscientious of how you can improve environments there too, so that people still want to be part of what we're doing. So talent and employee experience and engagement and culture are really, really big because they're drivers of the business strategy and they're drivers of the performance. And that's the only way we're going to stay competitive and profitable and have the best people.
Yeah. A big topic right now, and we've been talking about a lot, is around how do you maintain that culture in a hybrid working environment. How have you found, do you think that it has shifted and changed it?
Yeah, I think there's pros and cons. I think the pros for us, and I'm sure other companies, is that with COVID, regardless of how well a company communicated prior to that, it forced them, if they were going to do it well, it forced them to amplify their communication like triple, right? So we were talking regularly to our employees. We were having regular leadership meetings. I mean, the virtual capabilities that companies were able to adapt was really, really tremendous. And I think COVID throwing us into that remote environment where we were required to figure out ways to do it allowed us to see how productive we could be. It allowed us to see the benefit of individuals having some flexibility. And it allowed us to recognize that the transparent communication, the honest communication, right? Because through the pandemic, we didn't always know the answers. And letting our employees know, we're right there with you. We're going to keep you informed, but we don't know yet. And it's going to change, and adaptability is what really allowed us as a in-office company historically to kind of reconsider the fact that we could still allow for flexibility and have an opportunity to gain talent that we hadn't gained before. Now, I think that we've been in it for a little while. What you find is there's some, I'm going to call it hangover, if you will, right? So it was all great and everything, but it can also be really hard for people to continue working from home if they don't have that environment, or if there are kids, or if there are aging parents, or if there are dogs interrupting. And I think people were looking for a balance of, no, I want an environment that I can go to and still collaborate and be in person, but I want the flexibility to work from home or a coffee shop or something else if it makes more sense. And I think we've been able to build that in. But I think as leaders, what we really have to remember is that we have to become more intentional. It was easy when everyone was remote
100%.
because you had to do it virtually. Now that things are hybrid and some people are back and some aren't, we can't forget as leaders, there are people still outside the walls. So while I'm in the office today, I have some employees who are here that I'm going to see in the hall or pop in and say hello to, but I can't forget that I have others that are working virtually. And it's still just as important for me to ping them on Teams or pick up the phone and call them and create that connective tissue. And it requires more intentionality, I think, from leaders to be aware of that.
Yeah, it's very, and also it's not natural as well. It's natural when you're in the office to just meet, literally bump into someone or pop into someone's office and say hi or meet at lunch or all of those things, right? But right. and there's triggers, but there's no triggers when someone's out of sight, out of mind, as well. So even that's something even I've struggled with, and having to make a more of a conscious effort and like put reminders. Give myself reminders to check in and to make moments happen, to schedule opportunities for us to all meet once a month, which is what we do as a team. All of us get together once a month and we go have fun and choose an activity and have those Monday check-ins where everyone comes in and connect everyone together. I think especially when you've got new hires coming as well, even more important, because how do they really feel? What does it mean to work here?
Yeah.
It's through those interactions.
Yeah. And I think we have to be conscientious of it also in how it impacts our processes and systems. So performance reviews are a great example of that, Chris, as you can imagine, right? When somebody's in sight, like you said, or you're seeing them in the office, there's a tendency for us to think they're doing more work or being more productive than somebody who maybe you're not seeing because they're remote. And we know from the remote experience, they're being as productive, but it's just human nature. And we have to remind ourselves when time comes for feedback and performance that we're saying to ourselves, oh, wait a minute, Chris is a rock star. Well, is Chris a rock star because he was in the office at 7 and maybe read the paper from 7 to 8 and then people came in while someone who was remote was already working? No, we have to peel ourselves back and really reflect on what were the expectations of this person's role? Are they doing their jobs? Are they meeting expectations? Are they exceeding it? How are they showing up for their employees or the customers? And we really have to be fair and equitable about that, because our assumptions or biases can come into play if we think just seeing somebody in person means they're doing a better job.
Yeah. And for many of us, we've been doing it that way for 30 years plus. Right. So it's very easy to have that unconscious bias and not even realize that you're doing it. And even I had to say, with Shane, my co-founder, and sit down and be like, we need to measure outcomes, not time in the office. It doesn't matter how early you get here or how late you leave. And it doesn't matter. It's what are we measuring now? It's a very big shift in mindset. And we also, like you said, had to put in place that technology stack and the right tools and able to see that. And that's right. And, technology is in many ways become part of the connective tissue of what brings everyone together as well. So it's very important. It's an interesting one. And I do think it's we said this before we hit record, it's a tough time, isn't it, to be a leader? Yeah.
There's a lot of responsibility on leaders' plates, and when you think back historically to organizations and to boards and to leaders, it was kind of like, nope, you have business results and fiduciary responsibility. And that was your framework, right? Except we have thousands of people showing up in our organizations to do that work every day. And our society has changed around us, and there's a lot of divisive topics, and there's a lot of different opinions, and there's people from different backgrounds. And when you want the best talent and you want people to feel like they belong and are part of something and to stay, there's a tremendous amount of responsibility on leaders' shoulders that's different from what they were accustomed to. It's no longer just operational KPIs. It's also, how do your people feel, and do they trust you, and do they want to work for you? And it's not just a paycheck, it's, are they recommending this as a place somebody else would work? There's so many factors. And it's recognizing as leaders, we're not the ones with the answers. We may see a vision and have direction, but 100%. If we're not willing to listen to our employees and get that input, we're not moving forward.
Yeah. I think that's the thing. It's a shift in, our job is not to have the answers. It's yes to set the vision, but together we get that together.
Yeah.
I don't claim to have all the answers. There's many times I sit down with a team, we're like, I just don't know. I need your help. And in that point, that's where everyone steps up, and that's why you hire great talent, and that's why people, people are excited, they're motivated by that. They can see that their role that they're playing, which makes them even more engaged. So leading with vulnerability and
right.
servant leadership is so powerful, but it's the opposite of what we've been taught.
It is.
for so long.
Yeah, it's the opposite of what we've been taught, and it's not something intuitively that everybody does, right?
No.
We're so accustomed to being able to be taught skills and different levels of expertise for things we have to do or fit into a framework of what was perceived leadership. And now we're asking people to show up and show a piece of themselves that hadn't been welcomed before, right? You didn't bring the quote unquote human into the workplace prior. You brought a body into the workplace and you left everything else at the door. Well, that's not, life is too complex now, right? And you think of all the technology that, while it's progressed stuff, it's also overloaded people to be connected 24/7. So they're running their businesses and they're running their jobs and they're running their families and they're running, intake of information. And at no point are people necessarily shutting off. And we have to be more cognizant that we have human beings impacted by so many things showing up. And yes, we have expectations that you have to do your job, and we have business goals and shareholders and stakeholders and customers and everything else. But our people have to want to be there doing it. And sometimes when they show up, you can't just leave everything at the door, and we have to be in tune with that human element. Is there something that's impacting them? How do we be empathetic? How do we be compassionate? How do we open up dialogue that allows an employee to say to their leader without feeling shamed or punished, I'm having a hard time right now. Can you help me prioritize? Or can you ensure I'm meeting my expectations? And I need you to know this is going on.
Yeah. What do you think are the top sort of three? We spoke about this before, right? And when I say we, I've only been doing this for 15 years, but I remember looking at the sort of top 3 leadership competencies that you need to be successful. And I look at that now, and it's like none of them even belong. Or a lot of what we're going to talk about don't even exist. Didn't even exist.
It's totally different now.
What would you say are the top? What would you say now are the most? If you had to choose 3 of the top leadership competencies, what would you say are the most important to be successful in this kind of VUCA world, let's say, that we're living in?
Without giving it too much thought and just throwing it out, I think the top 3 for me, I think authenticity. I think people have to show up as they are, because it's the best way that they're going to lead is through who they are, not trying to emulate somebody else. Authenticity, transparency, and honesty. Even if it's something somebody doesn't want to hear, right? As business leaders, we have to deliver a lot of messages, and we would always prefer to deliver the message the employee wants to hear. But sometimes the answer is something that the employee doesn't want to hear. We have to be willing to be honest about that too, and share the whys behind that. So I think the transparency and honesty piece. And then I would say empathy and curiosity. I think we have to have a willingness as leaders to know that it's okay to be empathetic and to feel something and see something from someone else's lens, because it is the only way we're going to know how to lead or inspire or redirect our employees to help us be the best we can be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we spoke before about culture. It's those 3 things, I think, that also is what shapes the culture of the organization. What's a big part of what shapes the culture of the organization.
Yeah, and I think listen, cultures, and you've heard this 100 times. I mean, you're running HR leaders and you hear from us all the time, but culture happens with or without us. Yeah. We all know that, right? So even if you're not intentional about it, cultures are shaping and shifting in organizations. And if you let that happen without playing some role in that, it can go horribly wrong. And culture isn't, I think sometimes people think, oh, it's just so people-centric that the culture is all kumbaya and nice and everything. No, having a people-centric culture isn't about not having expectations and not having guardrails or not having business goals. It's about realizing that we've got to do the best we can to put the tools and resources in place so that our employees know what that culture and expectation is. So in our case at LP, right, we took a look at what are the behaviors we're asking of our employees to create the culture for our performance. And we're very specific about it. And we take the mindset of think and act like owners. That's like our overarching principles. Think and act like owners, meaning you play a role in this company and you play enough of a role, you should think like you own it and act on that. And then underneath that, we have the behaviors, right? And it's innovate and simplify, it's be safe, it's embrace differences, it's lean in and speak up. But we have all these different behaviors so that any employee at any given time could kind of benchmark themselves as they make decisions or are doing something, saying, am I playing within these behaviors? Am I playing within what's going to make us great?
Yeah.
And then we hold ourselves accountable to it as well.
I love that.
But culture is critical.
It reminds me, I remember one of my leaders, and it really helped define my career, if I'm being honest, said to me one time, I can't remember what the challenge is. I came to them and saying, I don't know what to do. I'm struggling to make a decision. And they said to me, what would you do if it was your budget and you owned this company, Chris?
That's right.
And I was like, and I had to put all my emotion to one side, myself to one side, what it means for me to one side. And from that moment onwards, it just stuck with me. So every time I had a challenge or I was thinking about hiring someone, I remember there was a time where I nearly hired someone and I said, if I actually owned this business and this was my personal money, would I actually hire them then? And I actually was like, actually, no, I wouldn't. But I was just so close to hiring this person.
You're settling.
Because it wasn't my money. I know it sounds bad to say, but I'm being honest, and I'm sure many people listening have probably made decisions as well. And I was like, actually, you know what? If that was my money and I grinded and built this company, I wouldn't settle for that. And I felt quite bad about it at the time because I was like really so close to saying yes, but I was like, I just can't. It's not the right decision to make. I wouldn't do it. And then that really shaped the 10 years I was in that company. And people always said to me, even other leaders, they're like, Chris, you don't own this company. Because I would act so much. As like, I even at one point, because the culture of the sales floor is a sales floor of multiple sales teams. I didn't like the culture of the sales floor. So I requested to my CEO that I want to move my team to another floor to build what I feel should be, how we should run the sales teams and because it was really a culture of everyone against everyone. And I wanted to build a culture on my team where everyone was there for each other. Right. And I feel like I had to get away. And people are like, oh, you're so extra, Chris. You don't own this company. You're trying to make your own business. But I think that's why I stayed there so long. And I think that's why my team members were with me for on average 5 years plus, because they felt like we own this, and we were proud of it. And there was pride in what we did and what we delivered.
That's exactly right.
And people were there for each other.
Yeah, empowerment. That's empowerment.
Yeah.
Now, it takes leaders, though, when you talk about how hard it is, it's one thing to say we want our employees to be empowered. It's another to actually behave that way and encourage them.
That's true.
Safe enough to speak up without feeling like we're going to squash them down, or to present an idea or challenge an idea and say, do we really think this is the best? So as leaders, we've had to shift as well to really absorb that feedback and then be like, well, that's a great idea. Maybe we need to rethink it. And empowerment and accountability are really key things.
Or in the other way, I was interviewing Lego's leadership team recently for a new series they're doing called Up Close, where I basically sit down with the entire leadership team, CEO, CFO, the whole leadership team. And one of the questions I asked them is, how do you deal with disagreements? And, if you all disagree, but this leader who owns this, is the CMO, for example, and what happens if you don't agree with them? And as part of their values and their culture is they say that they don't have to agree, but that person's going to own it and they're going to put everything behind them to help them succeed, even if they don't even agree with the strategy, because it's part of the wider values, the culture. As long as it's in line with those,
Yes,
they're going to have each other's backs. And I thought that was so cool because
that's right.
it's not.
And that's a good leadership team, Chris. And that's similar here of,
But by the way, that person has to own it, everyone listening. So if it goes wrong.
they do have to own it. No, they do have to own it. Yeah. Ownership doesn't go away. And I think, we pride ourselves, our CEO has intentionally created an executive team that has very differing viewpoints. So oftentimes when our leadership team is together, we may agree on a number of things, but there are plenty of things we'll be like, wait a minute. What about the other side of that? Or can I play devil's advocate? Or what about this? And we're constantly having that dialogue or debate, if you will. And it's amongst the team and it's really healthy and oftentimes gets us to a better decision. But to your point, the owner of the decision and the owner that it's going to impact the business unit or whatever is the ultimate decision maker.
Yes.
And when he says, hey, I've heard y'all, this is great. Sometimes they may say, I'm going to change the direction I'm going. This made us better. And other times they're like, y'all, I'm really confident in this. I appreciate the feedback. I promise you this is the right thing. And when we leave that room, we go forward united.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important. I think it's okay for us to know when or if something like that failed, it doesn't become a turnaround like, I told you so.
That's also a very good point. Yeah.
It should become, that was worth trying because this is what we learned.
100%, because otherwise that no one would ever take a risk and no one will ever bring an idea to the table. And you'll just be, everyone will be a bunch of yes men, yes women, and everyone's just going to agree with each other. And you have no diversity, you're not inclusive, you don't have diversity of thought. It's also, it's not a place that people want to work. Let's be honest.
Right.
And that was, and to tie up that point about my last company, it's one of the reasons I left is when I wanted to break out of that mold of being the sales director, I was told, stay in your lane. And I said, I was like, I've been here for 10 years in sales. I've kind of hit a ceiling where I feel like I've learned a lot. 10 years of sales. I want to work in marketing. I want to go working operations. I was just interested, eager to learn. And I was told, stay in your lane. Or if I had suggestions that were non-sales related, you work in sales, let us worry about marketing. You working here, and that was like, all right, I'm going to find somewhere else. Whereas that was why I left.
It's a really powerful example you just gave, because I think a lot of companies right now are struggling with elements of that from the talent standpoint. So a lot of what you'll hear, especially with the younger generations now, is this desire to constantly learn and do more, and career pathing.
Yes.
So a lot of times you will have somebody come into an organization with an area of expertise, right? We may have hired you in sales because you'd had that experience. We want you on the team, et cetera. But being able to have those career conversations with employees about, what do you want to do next? Oh, you're interested in that? How do we stretch you and get you to spend time with individuals over there to see if your skill sets match, or if there's something you can learn, or if there's a way to laterally take on more so that then you can grow. And I think looking at our talent pools a little more creatively is going to be a requirement for HR and organizations to be able to keep and stretch and attract talent, because otherwise, if we don't do that, people will leave.
Yeah. And it's interesting because
that's an art. That's a little bit of an art more than a science. It's a tough one.
It's also, you're talking about leadership issues because, you have leaders that are talent hoarders. That's a whole nother challenge you have to, and now my boss was very open to say to me, I knew that off the back of my sales, the exact number that my boss would be, my manager will be losing, because they made a commission and a bonus on Chris and Chris's team. So of course, they're not incentivized, they're not measured to do so. So they're going to do everything in their power not to let Chris leave this team and go working marketing, because they were going to lose thousands of pounds by doing it. And that's an issue, right? So if you're rewarding your teams, your managers and leaders in one way and expecting them to demonstrate leadership behaviors and competencies in another area, but they're not incentivized, what do you expect is going to happen as well? And it's only when I started this company, did I realize how important my perspective from a sales lens was across different functions. So when me and Shane have conversations around marketing operations, I have that 10 years of experience of speaking to customers, understanding their challenges and their needs and their pain points. Now I can actually work with the marketing team to help formulate that strategy based on that lens. And then vice versa, they have the same input. So I love the diversity of thought, getting everyone's inputs and insight. Even if they've never worked a day in product or finance, I want to hear your lens on what do you think about that. And it's really cool, actually. The amount of times I've been surprised by new hires or people, I'm like, wow, that's a really good point. I never even thought of. let's do that. On that point, because you mentioned it earlier, and I had to ask you about it. You wrote The Art of Being Fired, and always recreating your better selves. So tell us what you mean by the art of being fired, because I thought it was a really interesting way of putting it.
Well, nobody wants to be fired, and I would tell you personally, I can't generalize this for everyone, but I always want to be doing my best, and I always want to be, I'm very driven to go learn more and do my best. And of course, we always want to be acknowledged for that. And I think a lot of times, a lot of us have this ongoing fear of, am I going to be fired? What happens? What's right? And it can be such a devastating blow to somebody, but what we do with that and how we respond to that is really what makes us better. And I say that because when I was younger, I was in recruiting, and there was a lot of money to be made in it, very similar to sales. You go out and you connect and it was legal recruiting. You connect the attorneys with the right prospects, whether it's their companies or law firms, et cetera. And, based on that, they pay you a substantial incentive. And I'm really the people connector. That's what I love, right? I love making the money from the success of that, but they had to be symbiotic. And I had an individual who was miserable at the firm he was at, and I knew exactly what he was trying to get away from. And there was another firm that really wanted him. But literally, Chris, all you had to do was change the names on the door, and it's the same firm. So I knew through my relationship with him that even though this company wanted him, this firm wanted him, if I put him there, he was going to be miserable. He wasn't going to last. He certainly wasn't going to use my services again. So we were going to lose not only the commission from the company, but we were going to lose his trust. And I had a leader come and say, you need to place this person.
Because they want the money.
That's right. And you have to do it by X, because we get X amount of money paid to us. And I said, I'm not placing him there because we're long-term going to lose, because he's not going to recommend us. He's not coming back, all the pieces. And I really didn't think at the time it would be a big deal. I was successful at what I did, but I flat out refused. Now, they weren't asking me to do something illegal, but in my mind, I'm like, this isn't an ethical practice. We're deceiving somebody to get money. I'm not placing him. And they fired me.
Oh, man.
And I was crushed. I was like,
you done the right thing and got penalized for it. That's great. Yeah.
I did. I'd always been taught, do the right thing, right? And I did it, and then I got fired. And it was a great lesson once I got over the, I have no paycheck, and my ego was crushed and all those different things. But really what it taught me was, how do I want to show up, and what do I want to be, and what do I contribute? And interestingly, that was my entry point into the business world. Like, I was doing the recruiting piece, but that was my entry point into compliance and ethics, which is where my business career started. And I moved over and took a position with Home Depot and wound up helping build from their ground up their compliance and ethics program internationally, and then went on to do it for Winn-Dixie and then Cintas before spreading into operations and then DE&I, talent, and HR. And I never would have done that. So it's, if you're fired for something egregious, you better learn from that and be better, right? Like, is the point.
Yeah. Like, I love that. It never feels like it at a time. And by the way, I was the person you described. So when I did leave that company after 10 years, there was a recruiter that had been calling me every year for like 5 years. And every year he would call me and just check in, hoping that this was the time I was going to leave. So that company that I was at got purchased by a private equity business. They kind of stripped out all the management team, cut costs, cut salaries, cut commissions. It just became a place that I didn't recognize, I didn't want to be in. And I got that call from that person. They heard about what was happening. And I was promised a lot more money than I was on. But unfortunately, I made a mistake, and I did ask, what is the culture, how leaders, all the thing, and I was just promised it's different here, Chris, all those things, and I walked into the same environment somewhere else, even though I was on a lot more money, I spent a year and 3 months there miserable.
Yeah.
I'm talking about not miserable, but I was having anxiety attacks on the way to work. I was making excuses not to come in because it was like the idea of getting up in the morning and going into that space was affecting me mentally. It was toxic. Yeah. And it was so bad that when I finally made a decision to leave, I actually was like, I'm just going to start a company. Because I was like, I never want to be put through this ever again. And I never want to be told that my ideas aren't valued and I'm not valued. And I never want to treat people the way I saw people being treated. And I'm going to go. And luckily I had my best friend and co-founder Shane, who decided to be brave enough to do it with me. And we're like, let's go and build something that we can be proud of instead. So we learned from that and took that negative energy, to your point, and funneled it into positive energy into what we're doing now. And don't get me wrong, it was tough because we went from what we were earning to barely being able to get by on less than 25% of what we were making. It was really, really tough. And when you've got a mortgage and as when we first met, a daughter on the way, it's hard. But I tell you what, I wake up every day excited, even when I was making no money, about what we're doing and what the possibilities were, because I always knew worst case scenario, I could still get that miserable job. Like if I had to, I'll do it. If I really needed to, to pay the bills and make sure that my family was looked after. But that was worst case scenario.
You touch on something so critical there. That's so critical to companies when you talk about culture and people. Everybody can go somewhere and get a job. And I don't want people just working at the organization because they're getting a paycheck and going home, right? You touched on wanting to fit in, wanting to feel valued, wanting to be heard. These are all human elements that everybody wakes up every day kind of with the intention of wanting to do something good, wanting to be good people, wanting to feel pride and connected to where they spend the majority of their time. We spend more time at work than we do practically outside of it. And, a culture that provides pride and values the feedback of others and all of those different pieces generates a workforce that people are excited to be a part of and want to come into and want to stay. And what that does is create this holistic blanket, if you will, as opposed to somebody just looking for, I'm going to leave your company because there's nothing connecting me here and I don't feel any pride. So I am going to leave just for $5,000 more.
Yeah.
Which when you spread that over a year or you take the taxes out of it, isn't giving anybody anything else.
No. Yeah. It's interesting because, before that, I was always offered loads more money by that same person who called me, but I loved my job.
Right.
So I never even considered it.
Right.
I like significantly more. I remember like even speaking to my wife and I was like, oh man, this is, but I was like, yeah, but I have such a great team. I love my team. I've put my energy and passion into, as I said, I felt like even though I never owned it, I felt like I owned my business unit, literally. So I was like, I'm not going to leave for an extra 10%, or even more actually than that, but it's just not worth it. But then when things changed, I was very quick to consider other options, which is quite sad actually. I remember it was quite a bad experience of like leaving, being like, I'm so disappointed in the leadership team of this is how it ends after 10 years of putting a lot of energy, blood, sweat and tears, literally in some cases, into this is how we go out. Like on that.
Culture,
yeah,
that's culture too, Chris. Like I think a lot of companies don't put enough emphasis on the departure of people, right? Somebody may leave and we tend to get angry, like how could you be leaving us, versus if we don't have a spot for them or there's not an opportunity to grow, we've developed talent. And yes, now they're leaving and we hate to lose them, but they're going out to do something better. Listen, talent works in funny ways, and you never know where you're going to end up working, who you're working for, where that talent comes back around or may re-enter. The respect and professionalism and celebration of somebody's success, we all need to do a little better, because they may go get better and actually come back or bring us something that's really useful. I mean, it's, it's all connected energy.
100%.
And I think how people come in and how they leave.
Yeah. Well,
Part of culture.
before I leave you, I would say, unfortunately, that was my scenario as well. Is like the moment I said that, it went from that no one, all of a sudden, my 10 years of dedication turned into, we're going to sue you.
Oh.
And literally 2 months, or not even that, a month later, I had the non-compete letter in my door threatening me. I had, you can't go work for any competitor. I had all of those things. Both of us had it. And it was real, like, disheartening. It's like, wow, after all of that, this is, and it kind of, it compounded that we made the right decision, to be fair. So I was like, look, this, I remember holding it up to Shane and being like, this proves we made the right choice. Like, the fact that they are that scared now that we're going to go and build something, because they're like, oh my God, Shane and Chris are building a directly competing company to what we do, even though we wasn't, that they were so worried about that. I said to Shane, this is a compliment. I was like, there are like two guys out on their own, they're not worried about you. It actually, and then we kind of smiled, we're like, it's fine. It means that we made the right decision, but it wasn't nice, but it was fine. And it's the same thing. And unfortunately for them, most of them employees came to work here, and they still work here today with us, and they followed suit as well. Because they're like, I want to go work over there because they're probably going to value me a lot more as well. But listen, I'm conscious of your time, but it was great coming back, having you back on the show. It's been a while. It's good to catch up with
talk to you again.
And I'm so happy for you as well that you found somewhere. And I remember when you first started as well. So clearly it's going well.
Yeah. No, it's great. It's great. It's been 3 years, and it was a great decision. I wouldn't look back. And like you said, I love the team. I love the people. I love the vision and strategy of the organization and what we're doing and what we're serving and the culture we're creating. So it's, happy to be here and happy to share it.
Amazing. Well, look, thanks again for coming on the show, and look forward to doing this again in the near future. We'll have a little check-in every now and then, every few years. Listen, enjoy the rest of the day. Enjoy the move. Enjoy the new office, and I'll see you again soon. Thanks.
All right. Be well. Thanks, Chris.
Bye.